Welcome to Legends to Leaders. Today we're honored to introduce Pat Mews. Pat has over 30 years transforming surgical services across the country. She has launched new programs and guided teams through new facility openings and saved her hospital clients millions of dollars through her consulting services, all while mentoring the next generation of leaders. She's been recognized by the AORN and beyond. And today, Pat Mews is going to be talking to us about the basics of block scheduling, optimization, and surgical services. Welcome to Legends to Leaders, Pat Mews.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here and an honor.
Pat, you're going to AORN this year?
Yes, I am.
How many years in a row is that?
I have not missed a Congress since 1973 when I was a student. So I've been to every single one.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see you in New Orleans.
I look forward to seeing you.
Well, let's dive in. When a nurse leader is promoted from manager to director of surgical services, what might change about his or her role and how they look at block scheduling? What might be surprising as to how that might change?
Well, the individual needs to be very involved, and there should be a guideline or a policy on how your surgery schedule is run. Block scheduling is so important. The physicians, especially your recruiting team, they go out and look for a new surgeon, and one of the first questions the surgeon has, how much block time can I have?
Okay.
So that's why it's important not to block out your entire schedule, because you always want to have some open time for newer surgeons or for a brand new surgeon who's going to bring you a lot of volume.
Interesting. Okay. So that's lesson number one. Keep open times for the ability to kind of think on your feet and respond to an opportunity that presents itself.
Yes.
What are the most common drivers of poor block performance? Is it a sense of entitlement, inaccurate data? Tell me a little bit about what the drivers are of troubles on the block schedule.
Well, the troubles are sometimes political. The physician who has been there for a long time, he feels he's entitled to X number of time, but yet he doesn't fill that time. So the staff and other surgeons get very upset about that. And that needs to be looked at and needs to be addressed. And that's why it's so important to have a scheduling committee, task force, not necessarily the governance committee or the steering committee that runs the operating room, but you need to have a committee that looks at just scheduling so that you don't take up the whole time during the surgery steering committee. So on this team, you need really key people. And the key people should be the surgeon. And whether you want to put, it would be great to put on two surgeons, and the surgeon's a very tenured surgeon and a new surgeon, and always have anesthesia on that committee, because anesthesia is there daily and they really know what goes on in the schedule, whereas your surgeon comes and goes on the days that he's blocked. Have someone from that schedules the cases, the OR director, a data person, and that data person is really key. It needs to be someone that the physicians trust. And when you're preparing this report to go to the steering committee, you want to have usually your anesthesiologist double check those numbers before the report is given. And it's always helpful to have either an anesthesiologist or a surgeon giving that report as opposed to the director giving the report.
Why is that important?
I feel they listen better, and not that they don't respect the director, but it just holds more water to have another doc report the numbers and to answer questions. The director is always there to answer the questions. So going back to who's on the committee, it really needs to be people who are in that operating room every day. And the scheduling committee should really include someone from a surgeon's office. So maybe it's your busiest surgeon and you want to find out what's enabling that scheduler at the office to get cases on the schedule. So it's always good to have that individual there.
That is insightful. Let's go back to something that you said that brought up a question mark, and that was the data. You have to have high trust in it, and you need to double check it. What are the common errors that come out of that data?
Well, probably the biggest thing is timing. How are you looking at the times? And AORN had an efficiency task force, and I was on that task force with a number of other nurses nationwide. And you want to look at how are the times measured? Is it time in to patient out? And when your next patient comes in, is it time out to patient in? So these, you have to have your definitions defined, and they should really be posted. And a lot of times when you start this out and you don't have clear definitions, what I have done is type up the definitions, and it's all part of the policy. And there are 5 definitions, and I would paste them in above the urinal.
Okay.
It gave them time to look at them, and I also pasted on the inside of the bathroom door. So the docs, they knew that what does the first case start mean? It means if you walk in that room 1 minute after 7:30, you're late. Don't give them any grace time, because if you give them 5 minutes late, they'll take 10 minutes. So that's how you really have to be on top of the times and the definitions. And does everybody understand that? And there was one time we had a back surgeon who had very long procedures, and we were showing him the numbers. He couldn't believe it. I don't take that long. And then we showed him the time the patient went in the room, the time he walked in the room. And there's also really, it's key, what takes so much time from the time the patient goes in the room to incision time. There's prepping, positioning, making sure anesthesia, because anesthesia takes some time. You might have some anesthesiologists who are very slow. So you have to take that into consideration. There are some surgeons who will not use certain anesthesiologists. So you have to work with them and you have to honor that, because his time, her time is so valuable. Anesthesia, their committee will help that individual. And if the operating room does not have an anesthesia assistant, they need to develop that. And there are guidelines for that. There's actually a group of anesthesia assistants, and it started in California. And I used to have my whoever wanted to be that, it would usually be like an assistant that was doing something else, and they really wanted to be the anesthesia assistant. So we had criteria, but it worked.
Going back to the scheduling committee, you mentioned that your docs and your anesthesiologist may not be the same as on the steering committee. Is there a method to the madness? Do you specifically not want them on both the steering committee and the scheduling committee? Or is it you just kind of read the room? Are there some no-go zones? Are there some rules of thumb?
Well, the one thing is if you have two surgeons on your scheduling committee, you definitely want one of them at the steering committee. And the same thing, you definitely want that anesthesiologist at the steering committee so they can support each other. If both surgeons want to go to the steering committee, that's fine. But they need to be there to answer questions because there are a fair amount of surgeons that don't trust the data. And they say, so that's why sometimes after the steering committee, if a surgeon is really having a problem understanding the numbers, then we'll have a special meeting with him or her, and it would be anesthesia. Anesthesia is usually the one that I found in most operating rooms that's really your right-hand man with the numbers and the data person.
So when you're having challenges with block scheduling, do you tend to think that they're behavioral driven, or do you feel like that you should give maybe like the benefit of the doubt and assume best intent? Tell me a little bit about kind of how you should be thinking about some of these challenges.
Both. Some of them feel, like I said, they feel entitled. Others, because they're a new surgeon and they're going to bring in a lot of volume, they feel that they should have some kind of priority. So that's why it's so important to do an analysis of what is happening now at in your surgery. How was the schedule developed? What are your policies? Are they specific? Are they standardized? Does one surgeon get to do this and another surgeon get to do that? The most important thing is standardization and utilization. So those two things will really help you keep your schedule moving.
Okay, standardization and utilization. So um, tell me exactly the definition of standardization. How do you mean that?
All the surgery cases need to be identified. Like if a surgeon's doing a total hip, does one office say book it as a total hip, another one a total hip arthroplasty, another a total hip, you know. So all the verbiage needs to be standardized for that procedure. And especially in GYN, they are all over the board. And what we did, we actually developed a list by the CPT code and showed them the verbiage they should be using. And that worked out great.
Where did you post that?
Well, we gave it to the offices and
Okay.
we also had it at the steering committee. Um, it's too specific, especially with the CPT code. The doc is very familiar with the CPT code because that's what he's going to bill by.
Right.
So that's why it's important to have the correct CPT code on that procedure and how is it defined.
So I presume that if block scheduling isn't being done well, and then you take it on and you move it to what a good block scheduling looks like, I presume that you'll say that the work is never done. But when do you feel like you can look at block scheduling and say that looks good? And how do you look at good? How do you define good?
Well, I have been involved in setting up the policies or the guidelines, whatever the hospital wants to call them, their scheduling guidelines. And are they out of line? I mean, do they define what release time is? Do they define the start time? And, you know, are you looking at overall schedule, the contribution margins? Because you might have a surgeon who's doing multiple procedures, but it's costing you money. It's not making you any money. So that's where you need the CFO to help you in developing that steering the scheduling committee. Because if you don't know your contribution margins and you just have a doc that's doing maybe 8 procedures, but every single one of them, you're losing money. So that's what's important to know, but then you don't have to say, oh, we're not going to do that case because we lose money on it. You help that doc take a look at his implants. Is he bringing somebody else extra? Do I have to have extra nurses in the room? So that's what you look at.
That's terrific. So a theme I'm gathering is the importance of definitions, whether they be standardized terms, whether they be the definition of what is release time, according to like policies and procedures. It seems like definitions is thematically important when you're looking at block scheduling.
Correct. Because one surgeon might think this and another surgeon thinks something else. So until it's presented, and then again, if they do not have a good surgery scheduling policy, then you have to look at what's it going to take? What is the culture? How can you make those changes? And when you look at the change, you have to plan. First of all, you have to analyze what's on paper. Then you have to put a plan together. And then after the plan, then you've got to try and work it out. So you do something and then you study how this plan is working. It might not be working well, so you have to go in and make some adjustments, and you need input from everybody, not just the surgeons, but anesthesia, the team leaders, and the staff working in the OR. You want the staff involved that they know what all these definitions are. So those definitions are also posted in the staff's bathroom or their break room so that they know that what the docs and communication to the staff is so important because you could be making changes with the surgeons and the staff doesn't know what's going on. So you have to fill them in. So a mini report should be coming from the surgery steering committee to the staff so that they know what's running their OR. And the other thing is the surgeons need to know that's their OR. They have a say. They need to be involved on how it's running rather than being on the outside and just complaining. So by putting them right in the mix of what the changes are, it really helps out.
So on the one hand, we're very precise. 1 minute late is late. We're defining terms. On the other hand, there's a little bit of flexibility, for example, keeping a block open in case we want to add cases or opportunity falls in our lap. How do you determine when to be flexible, when to bend, and when to bend? And is it using some kind of tool like contribution margin to sort of put a surgeon in a more flexible category because he or she might bring more revenue or more contribution margin to the hospital?
Again, you need to look at their utilization over the last 3 months, because during your analysis of their block or their policy, you need to find out not just by cases, but by minutes, because one doc might be doing 4 total joints in a day, and another will do 4 total joints, but it takes them almost twice as long because his minutes are costing my OR a lot more money than the surgeon who's very efficient. So by not having efficient surgeons, and that again is all managed by surgeons. So if we have a surgeon who's really slow, causing lots of problems, that's when we have to go to the chief of surgery or anesthesia, and they need to sit down with them and ask, how can we help you? How can we help you? Not just complain or just say, you got to move faster, because it's not going to happen. And he might say, I need someone to help me with this, or I need someone to help me with that. So he might have a PA that closes, and that PA is very slow. So that's another thing that needs to be addressed, because if this is a doc that wants flip rooms, you've got to look at how much time is being held for him to get through that one case to get to the next case.
This is terrific. So if we are hiring for a director of surgical services, imagine you're the C-suite and you're thinking about maybe promoting a nurse manager into that role or hiring even from external, but you've got block scheduling problems and you know that it needs to be solved because you're hearing about it maybe from the providers, from the surgeons. What questions might you ask a potential director of surgical services candidate in an interview to know whether or not they can solve your problem?
Well, I think you have to ask what his or her background. Have they developed block scheduling before? What are some of the challenges they've run into? How much do they know about block scheduling? When I was a director before I went into consulting. And my biggest help in consulting was working with the team when I worked with Johnson and Johnson. And I learned a lot about scheduling. I was a director before that, and I thought I knew what was going on, but I learned, the definitions, the utilization, the standardization, blocking by CPT code, or scheduling by CPT code. So all this, and it's really sad that we can't, like, if you're putting in a new director and you know that OR needs some help with block scheduling, can you call me in to just do that part? That would be helpful if you know of someone who has a great schedule, and are they willing to share? But like when I do my consulting, it's the whole OR. But just to change the scheduling, that would also be very helpful to a new director and help them with their leadership. You want to be able to grow them so that they can see the future and, what is this schedule going to bring? Are we starting robotics? Where are we going to put them? They take a long time, especially if you have new surgeons who are learning robotics. So that's a whole different ballgame. And also, what surgeries are moving to an ASC? Because you should know at least 3 months in advance when those surgeons are going to take their cases to an ASC. So then you know that that block's going to be open and you need to work at filling it. Another thing is when a surgeon's blocks are released because they're going on vacation or they're going to a meeting, your scheduler needs to know what offices that she can call up and say, hey, we've got some extra time here. Can you put a case in there? Not waiting for them to call you. So your scheduler also can fill up some of those gaps.
So I'll let you answer the unasked question in a moment here, but let me ask you this final one that's on my mind. So we've all been aware of like printing a stack rank of the surgeons and putting it in the surgeon break room. Do you believe in that? Is there a use case for that when it comes to block scheduling?
I think you need to discuss that with the steering committee.
Okay.
And the steering committee will give you direction. Now, your scheduling committee, they might want to post it, but it needs to be discussed at the steering committee with the other surgeons, because sometimes just by putting letters and not their names of who's where and who's the most efficient, that's sometimes helpful because right away those docs want to know, well, who's K?
Right.
Who's this? Who's that? And you don't give out that answer at a meeting. You say, come see me. I'll tell you who that is. So, you look at it two ways, and don't let the director make all those decisions. You've got to have surgeons and anesthesiologists, your right hand man, to help you make those decisions. Because I look back early on when I first became a director, I was implementing stuff, shooting from the hip. And later I found out, man, that's not the way to go. But you don't know.
Is there something I didn't ask? Something that you think is important that we tell the audience about block scheduling?
Well, I think one of the things is the director. If the director is going to be accepting the letters from the new surgeons or from the surgeons' offices, that they want block time. And that's really key, that it should be in writing that they want block time. So that is looked at by the scheduling committee. And that director needs to be very honest and timely and transparent, and their integrity of, how have they done things in the past. And, they always say, you're as good as your last show. And I think about that because that was a statement my husband used a lot. And when I think of, where did I make my mistakes and did I learn? And that's what your new director needs to take into considerations. They're going to make mistakes, but did I learn from it? And what did I learn?
Pat, this has been terrific. Here's what we have heard today, some minor but easy nuggets of wisdom. Keep a block open for opportunity that falls into your lap. But then we heard some important things. Build a scheduling committee, not to be confused with a steering committee. We learned the importance of definitions. And of course, we learned how important data is, whether it is 1 minute late or it is simply that the stack rank of surgeons could be their name, and it could be just a letter for the purposes of letting them know that they're being measured for these types of things. Pat, thank you very much for your insights on block scheduling. You've been a great leader for the next generation of perioperative leaders and a great maven in the AORN. So thank you for participating in Legends to Leaders, and keep up the great work.